Greetings, fellow Rotarians. Today is a great day. We have a good speaker, Sam Abady. He's the editor-in-chief of the Westchester Guardian. He's here to talk to us today. Thank you. Sam?
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be here. I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. My background briefly gives some foreshadowing of what I'm going to speak about. I am by training a civil rights lawyer, a legal academic, and for the last 2 months a newspaper. And I'm going to speak today about the role of whistleblowing and community newspapers as it relates to Rotarians. Those two things might not seem obvious, but they do have a relationship. It's fitting to speak to Rotary because Rotary clubs are about service, concern. Now those general principles bring us to the newspaper, which I now edit and have edited for the last 2 months, the Westchester Guardian. The Guardian is maybe known to some of you. It's a crusading community newspaper that was started in 2006, and it's dedicated in part to exposing corruption and mismanagement in local government. And that's why the Rotary principles developed by Mr. Taylor and adopted by Rotary International are very much pertinent to the issue of this kind of community newspaper. Is a matter the truth? Is publishing fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill? And will it be beneficial? Those 4 principles very much apply to a weekly paper, which, unlike a daily paper that seeks after scoops for breaking news, weekly papers give the opportunity for writers and editors to do more in-depth investigative reporting. And for the Guardian, historically, that has meant reporting primarily on local governments. Thomas Jefferson once said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. And as all of you probably know and firmly believe, in a free society, ignorance breeds contagion, and information is the infectant which kills the microbes of corruption and lawlessness, whether on a grand scale or a local scale. Information is what allows citizens to correct malfeasance and mismanagement, bloat and waste, and ignorance suffocates freedom. But newspapers, and particularly weekly community papers which investigate local governments, are the lungs of freedom, an essential organ of democracy without which our open society cannot live. So first and foremost, what do newspapers do? And specifically this type of community newspaper. Newspapers must inform, and that means literally to form from within. Newspapers form our society by the quality of the information they impart to readers. And since I've taken over the Guardian, one of my, I should say my chief principle, reified in my contract with my publisher, was that I would have editorial discretion to radically change the direction of this newspaper in order to better serve the community that is Westchester, including all of its communities within, such as Mount Vernon. And that meant improving the quality of the information that was imparted without losing our edge, but to make it a genuine community newspaper. So now, unlike before, we cover a much broader variety of things at a much higher level of writing and editing. We have a columnist who opines on international matters, because, as Martin King said, we are all bound up in an inextricable web of mutuality. What happens in the world affects all of us, even in Westchester. We have a writer who opines every week on issues of national significance. I have cheap labor in the form of my wife, who's a doctor and writes medical articles about health matters under a column by that name. And we have columnists on the left and right side, if you will, of the ideological spectrum. We are very balanced by design in what we do. If you follow the paper closely, you'll see some letters to the editor have really raked me over the coals for what has been deemed to be allegedly a supposedly left-wing bias of the paper, and letters on the other side that take the opposite position, and a former columnist who actually quit because he didn't like the right-wing tilt of the paper. So I figure if I'm offending people on both sides, I'm obviously I think I'm accomplishing my purpose of trying to be balanced in the presentation of our editorial opinion. But even though we have columns, the news portion of the paper, the investigative news portion of the paper, is really more germane to my topic today. And then specifically, when newspapers inform with quality information, it means we don't, as I believe happened in the past, publish gossip and scandal and rumor which serves to titillate, but really degrades and weakens society. Gossip and rumor sells papers, attracts viewership in broadcast media, but it doesn't elevate. It doesn't change the community in the same way. But exposure of misdeeds by those who betray the public trust really does strengthen and elevate our society. Now, that ties together my themes of service to the community, of which you all are exemplars as members of Rotary, and whistleblowers. Because newspaper reporters who develop stories for investigative reporting don't just have these things, born from their heads like Athena from the head of Zeus. People have to come forward with information. And it's the people in the community who blow the whistle, who come forward, do so in recognition of the public policy of our state, and that encourages this. And specifically, it's encouraged in Section 79H of the Civil Rights Law of the state of New York, which New York has led the way really nationally in creating what's known as the Shield Law. The Shield Law means that if Mr. Roberts here, for example, were a commissioner in Greenberg and discovered waste or corruption and wanted it exposed but did not want to expose himself in the process, he could come to a newspaper reporter and say, these are confidential documents that I've obtained from the mayor, the governor, the attorney general, that show this misdeed or this wrongdoing is happening in government. And as a source, his identity is protected. No public authority or prosecutor could subpoena those documents. None could compel the publisher or editor or reporter at the newspaper to reveal his source. So New York State, the legislature representing the will of the people, by our Shield Law, by Section 79H of the Civil Rights Law, has expressed as a matter of public policy that the First Amendment is our key guarantor of good government, and creates this privilege, this Shield Law, so that reporters who are not like doctors, who are not like lawyers, they don't have a privileged relationship to the public, but that reporters nonetheless have a shield so that sources, whistleblowers, are protected. And why is this necessary, and how does it impact on local governments? The average citizen is not impacted by some of the larger issues that we read about in society simply because they occur more rarely. Even if those issues make a difference to our views, and even if they provoke passionately held beliefs. So, for example, you all remember the Terry Schiavo controversy. You had a woman who had an automobile accident, who had a massive stroke, and who was clinically brain dead, and yet her essentially lifeless body kept alive by artificial means through ventilators and hyperalimentation